Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by Rollbar. Rollbar is real-time error monitoring, alerting, and analytics that helps you resolve production errors in minutes. And I talked with Paul Bigger, the founder of Circle CI, a trusted customer of Rollbar, and Paul says they don't deploy a service without installing Rollbar first. It's that crucial to them.
We operate at serious scale, and literally the first thing we do when we create a new service is we install Rollbar in it. Like we need to have that visibility, and without that visibility, it would be impossible to run at the scale we do, and certainly with the number of people that we have. Like we're a relatively small team operating a major service, and without the visibility that Rollbar gives us into our exceptions, it just wouldn't be possible.
All right, if you want to follow in Paul's footsteps and start deploying with confidence today, head to rollbar.com/changelog. Once again, rollbar.com/changelog. Welcome to JS Party, a weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the show at changelog.com/community. Follow us on Twitter. We're at JSPartyFM. And now on to the show.
All right, welcome back to JS Party, everyone. We are here with a very special show and a very special guest. It's Atul from NodeGui and NodeGui React. Atul, thanks so much for joining JS Party with us today.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Atul. I am a software engineer working with a fintech startup called Anyfin. I am currently based out of Stockholm, Sweden. I'm originally from India. I primarily work on JavaScript ecosystem, but occasionally hack around with C++ and Rust on my free time. Yeah, and I'm so excited to be here to talk about NodeGui, which is my latest and most recent project that I'm working on.
Awesome. Great to have you. And joining me, my partner in crime today to chat with Atul is Nick Nisi. What's up, Nick?
Hoi, hoi.
Hoi, hoi. Well, we saw it on Instagram. I talked about it on the pre-show. I can't help but embarrass you a little bit here. You're fresh off a bicycle injury. Tell everybody what happened. Come on.
Oh, yeah. I was going too fast and hit some unexpected mud. And luckily, my helmet broke my fall. But yeah, I'm a little scraped up, but good.
Moral of the story is always wear your helmets, friends, when you're on your bike. And, when you're trying to stay healthy, sometimes it backfires and you get less healthy. Yeah, it's part of the risks we take. But we're not here to talk about that and embarrass Nick. We're here to talk about NodeGui and hopefully not embarrass Atul. A very cool project, NodeGui and NodeGui React. This is an open source library for building cross-platform native desktop applications with JavaScript and CSS-like styling. NodeGui apps can run on the Mac, they can run on Windows and on Linux from a single code base. So a somewhat typical story in the cross-platform regard, but it has some unique aspects to it. And so we're happy to talk about it. It's made quite a splash when you announced it last month, Atul. So we heard where you're from and what got you here, but tell us about NodeGui and why you decided to make this project and what makes it different from what we've seen before.
So basically, the story where it began is that I wanted to build a music player. So I was in my home computer. I primarily use Linux, and on my work computer I use Mac. But I wanted something that could work on both. So I set out for something that works nicely for me, but there was nothing. I wanted a small music player widget which would just lie around on the right side and then play my favorite music. So I started building it out around a year and a half with Electron. I could build it out. I finished it, but the problem was that it started using a lot of CPU and memory on the sides, and I was basically stuck because I can't just play a music player and not do anything else on the side, right? That doesn't work. So I set out looking for other alternatives, but couldn't find anything which is really optimal. So I started building a small framework, which was NodeGui. Back in the time, I used to also work with Qt on my free time. Qt is basically a C++ framework to build cross-platform native desktop applications. The thing with Qt is that it's not as easy to work with because it's C++, so you have to handle all the pointers and memory issues and everything. So I started creating wrapper around it so that I could export it to JavaScript. So after a while, I figured that I basically stopped working on music player. Now I started working on the complete framework itself. So I still haven't completely built out the framework, my music player yet, but hopefully that would happen someday. I assume. But I was also working on my professional time on React, so I was kind of inspired by React Native. So React Native kind of makes it very simple to make mobile applications. And I used to work with Cordova back in the day, and it was kind of like a browser solution for the mobile apps. So I wanted something same for the desktop application also. So currently, all the desktop frameworks are on Electron, which is a browser-based solution. I really love Electron for its simplicity and documentation and everything, but I wanted something more, small and much more lightweight. So I took some inspiration from React Native and I started building React NodeGui, which is kind of like how Cordova, people start transitioning from Cordova to React Native. I want the same thing to happen from Electron to hopefully React NodeGui someday. But yeah, this was a side project, but when I launched, I received a lot of traction, and I basically started working on it, but a bit more seriously. So yeah, that's pretty much the story, how it goes.
That I giggle a little bit. The fact that you don't have your music player yet, it reminds me. It reminds me. There's an old proverb where there's some scientists versus God, and they're trying to invent a sandwich from scratch. And so the scientists go out and they start trying to plant some wheat, and right when they get to digging, God stops them and says, "Hey, get your own dirt." And I feel like as developers, we're kind of like that a lot. I mean, we're much higher abstraction than dirt at this point, especially in the JavaScript ecosystem. But we're very much inventing our tools more than we're actually working on the things that we set out to do. It's like, okay, now I have to invent a universe in order to create this little MP3 player.
Yeah. So, but one thing which I focused on was not to reinvent everything. So I basically took out few inspiration from how Electron works internally. I even had a chat with Electron team. So they were pretty helpful. They basically scheduled a 15-minute video chat to discuss on how I can proceed. So even though we are kind of a competing framework, but it's pretty awesome to see how helpful and how awesome the open source community is, and especially the Electron team is. So yeah, so based on those inspiration, it follows kind of similar architecture to what Electron does, but only thing it replaces Chromium with Qt. So that's how it becomes lightweight.
And so I don't know much about Qt, but does that have like a browser component in it then that you're building around, or is it more translating to native components within Qt?
Yeah, so Qt is basically a cross-platform C++ framework. So it basically renders all your widgets on the native code. So for example, on operating system OS X, it would render something with Cocoa framework. So things like that. Yeah, but it also has a web browser engine, which I'm not using right now, but I would have a WebView component soon on NodeGui itself. But currently what it does is it does something what React Native does. It runs the JavaScript code, but in the end, makes native calls to the native APIs to generate native widgets on the fly.
Okay.
And the good part of Qt is that it supports styling with CSS. So I get that right out of the box. So you now have JavaScript and CSS, but not a browser, basically. So all your CSS styling is there. All entire cascading stuff is there. You could basically select a particular widget with ID and then do pseudo selectors like hover or things like that, which is amazing. That's why I chose Qt.
That's pretty cool. I never knew you could do that with Qt. It seems odd.
Yeah.
Is it just because CSS was such a known technology? Did they add that, once the web formalized around? Because Qt's been around a while, right?
Yeah, it's been around for around 12 years or so. Yeah. Okay. But the thing is, I think CSS is most underrated and the most powerful styling library system that I've used. I've used Android and other even iOS systems before, but the most flexible one is still CSS, and that's why I think it's quite powerful. I think that's why they might have realized and implemented it.
So I mentioned there's two projects here worth making the distinction, because you've made the distinction in your repos and I think in the way that you built it out. You have NodeGui itself, and then you have NodeGui React. So tell us about that distinction and the React story here.
Yeah, so NodeGui is basically a pure JavaScript version. It does not use any other. It's basically like writing document.createElement in a web world where you could just create a particular div or things like that. But React NodeGui is kind of a React renderer, something similar to what React Native is. You can basically write all the widgets as components and then share state or pass down props and everything. So it's a direct translation from NodeGui syntax to React syntax, and that allows a lot of flexibility, like managing states and things like what React provides out of the box. And the why I chose React, React is basically I am mostly familiar with React, but there is also an Angular port coming out by another collaborator of mine. So he is working on Angular port as we speak.
Well, this is following an architectural style which I have advocated for, which is to build your core libraries framework agnostic and then allow to plug into or use an adapter pattern or some sort of a wrapper or layer on top the APIs necessary for whatever things you're going to integrate with. So I think you're doing it right in that regard because React is the way to go today, but maybe not 2, 3, 4 years from now. And you will be well positioned with NodeGui to still provide value down the road. Even if React goes out of style or you quit using it or Angular takes off, you can serve more people for longer by making that abstraction. So I applaud you for that.
Yep. That's pretty much the same thinking that I followed. That's why I just built up. I was primarily interested in NodeGui, but ended up investing a lot of time on React itself.
So you mentioned one of the main reasons that you set off on this quest was because of like the performance issues with Electron and specifically like being V8 based. Under that, what other insights have you seen since porting or since creating this over something like Electron or React Native?
Yeah, so when I set out to build this, initially I thought it would be kind of simple. I could just export out Qt's widgets outside and make a Node.js add-on, native add-on. But it wasn't simple because Node.js has its own, every GUI system has its own message loop or event loop, and Node.js has its own event loop. So if you want two loops to work in a single thread, it's kind of impossible. So in order to merge them into a single loop, that's where the Electron's architecture came into play. I basically followed what Electron does under the hood. They merged two event loop, one of the Chromium's event loop and the Node.js event loop together to form a single event loop that works for both. Similarly, NodeGui merges both the Node.js and Qt's event loop to form a unified thing. And the best part of this is, in most cases, when the application is not in use, you would actually see 0% CPU use with the applications that you build with NodeGui, which is kind of a super plus because it saves a lot of battery on laptops and everything. Other than that, for a simple Hello World app, it would be around 20 megabytes of RAM, and there's only one thread running, basically. So you don't see a helper threads running in case of Electron or Chromium or Chrome, right? It's just one thread, one application running with 20 megabytes of RAM and 0% or 1 to 2% of CPU.
Sounds pretty nice to me. What about the developer experience in somebody who's familiar with Electron or maybe already has an app on Electron? Is there any familiarity? Is there a path to porting, or is this just like if you're starting fresh, try this because they're way different in terms of use?
Yeah, so it is not quite straightforward, unfortunately. But if you have a React-based applications and you had followed the nice patterns of abstracting out your components, like you created your own text and view and other components, you could eventually port the entire stuff by rewriting only the view layer, the elements of or the atoms of particular project, like text or anything. But yeah, other than that, it's sadly at this point of time, it's a complete rewrite. But it is quite similar to how you build applications of web. So you don't have to learn anything new. You would do something similar to what you do on the web page for styling, and even it's just plain JavaScript when you use it.
I guess the fact is complicated applications which have been architected in a way that have abstracted away their UI code probably have large portions of their code base that would port over. They just have to rewrite the UI, assuming that the UI is smaller than the rest of the app. Many of the small things that we write, it's like 99% UI, and like there's this one little piece of functionality that we build, like play music. But if you have a complicated application, maybe your code surface is mostly business logic and not mostly UI code. At which point that would make porting a little bit more manageable.
Yes, exactly. So that's where also React comes in, right? You could port out your components separately, and then it would work like nothing happened.
The This episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the simplest cloud platform for developers and teams with products like Droplets, Spaces, Kubernetes, load balancers, block storage, and pre-built one-click apps. You can deploy, manage, and scale cloud applications faster and more efficiently on DigitalOcean. Whether you're running one virtual machine or 10,000, DigitalOcean makes managing your infrastructure way too easy. Head to do.co/changelog. Again, do.co/changelog.
So let's talk a little bit about cross-platform frameworks because they have a long history and some people have had success with them. I think Electron has been one of the most successful, definitely in the JavaScript space. But in general, a lot of these things have been developed and tried and sometimes left behind, sometimes stuck with it. There's problems that they present, and it almost all falls back on Qt, I think, in the place of NodeGui, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. You have the problem of lowest common denominator, application abilities, like how you access APIs in the native OSs. You have sometimes the uncanny valley of UI where it looks pretty much like it belongs, but it doesn't actually look like it belongs. It's close, but it's kind of like weird, especially with windowing and the widgets and stuff. Other issues that prop up when you're building one piece of code to present on multiple platforms. So curious how NodeGui stacks up in that direction and just your thoughts on that in general.
Yeah, so one of the main reasons why I chose Qt was the same thing. So when I used other frameworks out there to build out the desktop application that I wanted, I couldn't style them to my needs, right? For example, they always gave me the native look. But sometimes I want to build something which is very custom. So what I did was, what Qt does is it allows you to paint over the native widget itself. So you could customize it to whatever you like. So the same way that you do it on web, right? You could just style on your buttons to look whatever you like using CSS. Similarly, you could do it with NodeGui. So you could make it look like a mobile app, or you can make a Mac OS app look like a Windows app, for example. So that kind of flexibility allows me to build any kind of styling or UI which I want. And secondly, one of the most important thing which I felt was that in case of React Native, why it's so successful is that you could build out your own native widgets or native plugins other than what React Native provides. So something like a native plugin support was actually needed. So which is what I released around 3-4 days ago. So with this, you could actually build out or export out more widgets from Qt world or any other C++ framework or anything native onto the NodeGui world by just writing an external plugin.
And would that plugin be in JavaScript or in C++?
Yeah, so you would need to write a bit of native code if you want to export out native functionalities, but the end user would always use the JavaScript counterpart, which is what React Native also does in the end, right? All the native plugins you write in either Java or iOS code, and then you export it out to JavaScript. Yeah, so that was one of the primary focuses this week. And one of the more interesting features are like event support. So all the events that Qt supports are now exported out. So Node.js supports something called event emitter. So I just send all the events from the Qt world or the native desktop world to the event emitter, and event emitter converts it to the JavaScript events. So that way you have access to an entire event system and all the style sheets that is provided by Qt, and even Flexbox layouting is supported. So React Native also uses something called as Yoga, which is a layouting library. So it allows you to do layouts based on Flexbox, things like align items or justify content or something like that. So now you can do that with NodeGui also.
So when you say React Native, I think about mobile, and then when you start talking about Qt, I wonder, does Qt have any sort of like mobile story, or is there a path towards mobile, or is this desktop only?
Yeah, so Qt also supports mobile applications, but currently I haven't exported those functionalities to NodeGui yet. But I feel that React Native does a really good job in the end, and I really do not want to reinvent the wheel. But I want to match React NodeGui's API to as close as possible to React Native, so that you could write the same code base and you could basically get out a mobile application with React Native also. So that way you don't reinvent the wheel too much. But Qt does support mobile applications as well, so it might not be too hard to export it.
Do we know any public code bases or even just maybe private code bases, but publicly known companies who are using Electron in such a fashion where they have a desktop application in Electron and then they have a React Native application that's running from at least a shared code base. Maybe they have separate aspects, but similar code. I'm asking both of y'all. I don't know the answer to this. I'm just curious if that's a thing people are doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure as well, but I don't know what Slack's mobile app is based on, but I have to see. Yeah.
The reason I ask because that would be a pretty unique value proposition in addition to your performance and memory consumption differentiator. Because right now, that's what you have to offer is this 20 megabytes of RAM, which is incredibly tantalizing as a user, as a person who's low on RAM at all times on my work machine, and then low CPU usage as well. But if you also said, and by the way, you could build out the same, from the same code base, you could build your GUI for both desktop and mobile. That would be pretty compelling.
Yep, maybe something for me to look at after this talk, right?
I'm curious how these components expose like things like CSS to you. So if I'm coming to this from the React Native side, how do I know what classes are available to use, for example?
Yeah, so there is so one of the good parts of Qt is that it is highly documented framework. So I could basically link out most of the documentations to Qt itself, although I'm writing a lot of documentation right now. But Qt has a complete list of what the style sheets, what the style properties you can use, all the paint properties like background color, border, etc. And also it also has support for advanced cascading. Like you could choose an element which is deep down nested inside, and you could also have access to something like pseudo selectors like hover, etc., which React Native doesn't support yet because it uses its own custom styling engine. But yeah, this would support all of those.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going, is how full featured can I get with styling this? And it seems like you can go pretty far.
Yeah, I really tried it out, and you could go pretty intense stuff like on hover for button, you could highlight color of something else. So those are pretty cool, I would say.
What are some apps that are out there in the wild? I know it's relatively new, and your MP3 player isn't quite ready yet. So that being said, you have some examples. There's calculators. There's things that provide. You can see how nice it looks cross-platform, showing off those Qt widgets. At a certain point, you wonder, could it scale to a larger code base or lots of widgets, and like, do things change as it gets bigger? It'd be nice to have something that's substantial being used it before maybe people hop on board. So I'm curious if anybody else has adopted it already. I know it's early days, or if you have built any, you got to build out some examples as you're working on it. So curious how complex you've gotten.
Yeah. So there is one example out there other than what I built. That is a password generator. But it's also a simple application, I would say. But yeah, people are trying it out. But the way I am developing it is a bit different. I start building a small app and then add functionality to it as I go, instead of just randomly picking out functions from somewhere and then porting it. So that way, whenever I notice a performance bottleneck or some issue with styling which I want better, I could basically look at it from a user's perspective. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm building out examples and then example applications on the side, and then I'm porting out the necessary functionalities. So that way I have even examples out, plus I could even look at it from a user's perspective, actual user's perspective.
What's the debugging story like, and how does it compare to something like React Native?
Yeah, so the debugging story is pretty similar to what you're used to in Node.js. So you could set up breakpoints and everything by just calling it with inspect, -inspect. On the JavaScript side, but even on the C++ side, you have some part of debugging because C++ supports something called as GDB. So even in VS Code, you have GDB plugins, which you can just plug in and you can debug your actual C++ code inside of NodeGui while you're working on it. If you want to do it, that is. Otherwise, you could always inspect on the JavaScript side by using regular Node's debugging tools like Node Inspector or things like that.
Yeah, nice.
So you can just think of NodeGui as a Node.js add-on, like an extension to Node.js. So that way you could use all the tools that Node.js supports for debugging.
What about if you take off the for debugging? Can you just use all Node.js compatible packages? Like anything in NPM that runs on Node is going to run here? Are there any gotchas?
Yeah, so anything that runs on Node.js can run on this pretty seamlessly. And even the native plugins, which something like a SAS or things like that, if you want to run, you could run it. which have those C++ add-ons will run properly on this. The only thing is, while packaging, you need to make sure that the Node add-ons that you're packaging actually also package the binaries with it so that they actually run. But this is all taken care of by another packer library that I introduced. It's called NodeGui Packer, and that basically is a webpack which is collects all the add-ons, JavaScript, and everything and packages it.
So once you have an app package, is there anything in there that would prevent it perhaps from being accepted into any of the popular app stores or distribution mechanisms?
Yeah, so I haven't really looked into it yet because it's just a month since I launched this. But yeah I'm actually looking into it. Okay. But it is using the standard Qt's. Qt provided these packaging libraries which I use, so they should be compatible because Qt already takes care of those. But I would have to actually submit an application and then see if it actually works.
This episode is brought to you by Algolia, search technology to power your business. Trusted by Twitch, Stripe, Adobe, and many more. Even us. Yes, we use them to power our search, and we love the way they obsess over that developer experience. They let us fine-tune the index for the best results and report back what people are searching for, even servicing search terms that get 0 results, which we love. Check the show notes for a link to get started for free, or head to algolia.com to learn more. So far, our tool is sounding pretty awesome. Are there bee dragons anywhere, or is it just all rainbows and unicorns? Like, are there any gotchas or drawbacks or things that people will run into? And they're like, oh, it sounded so great on JS Party, but now I found this out. Like, where be the dragons?
Yeah. So first dragon would be that currently it's not packing any pre-compiled libraries. So when you run it, it's gonna compile all the C++ on your system. So it's going to be slow in the first run, but eventually it gets faster because it gets cached and stuff. But yeah, there is a pre-compilation step coming up soon that should solve that. That's one, because in most systems, sometimes you don't have the necessary dependencies and things like that. And most of the issues that I get on GitHub is based on that. But yeah, that's going to be solved soon, and we are solving it as we go. Other than that, there is another dragon that I would say is you're not getting all the complete Qt widgets that you see on Qt website right now. It is an ongoing process, right? And you will still need to help out there a bit by building up either native plugins for it, or you could just wait it out and then raise an issue and then we would start building on it. But yeah, there is a pretty good list of widgets already, which should be useful for most cases, but some cases, very specific cases, will not be solved yet.
Is the focus primarily right now on windowed applications? Is there any availability or future plans to support things like I'm thinking on Mac, like a menu bar?
Yeah.
Or more advanced things like
a service, right? Something like a Docker service or something. So it is being currently worked on. So we do have support for system tray icons that you see, but obviously the services part is not yet ready. You could basically create a system tray icon right now, but the menu part is being worked on and should be out soon. But yeah, I'm not making any big promises, but yeah, that is basically under the roadmap. Yeah, it's the reason is I have to build a music player in the end, right? And the music player cannot just stay outside, so it needs to have a system tag.
I'm super excited about this music player. Maybe also consider a podcast integration. We'll flip you something under the table. So I have a question regarding that. I mean, maybe it's not even regarding that, but somewhat related is, big features down the road, things that it's missing, things that you want to add. So far, you've mostly said I and me and then like a few collaborators. I remember early on when Vue.js first hit the scene, we were interviewing Evan Yu, and I said, React has the establishment behind it, and Vue is basically you, Evan. And obviously he's overcome like that roadblock. But when you're going to use a cross-platform framework, I mean, the framework is a big dependency, right? So one of the things that would stop me from using this potentially are saying, well, Electron has so many companies using it. It's been around a long time. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, I got memory problems, but most of the issues maybe have been addressed. What's your story there? Like, are you going to be here for a while? Is this a flash in the pan? How are you going to stick around? And are you going to stick around?
Yes, the answer to this is this is one of the most common questions that I get. The thing is, yes, I agree. There is not a big company yet behind this, but I see a lot of value and I see a lot of people seeing value to it. And I have basically got around 20 to 25 contributions already from outside community in over a month. And I think that's pretty impressive. And I also wanted to join this podcast because I wanted to invite more people to join me. And it is a pretty easy framework to get started. The code base is pretty well organized for the contributions part. If you just poke around a bit, you could do it. And the thing is, you don't need to really know C++ to do this. You could hop around and take a look and then implement the same thing which I did already. And there are few core members already. Like there are 2 people apart from me who are also building actively on this. And there is another Angular port which is going on. So all of this makes I see it as a positive, and I would continue to work on this since I'm very passionate about just up development. And I did start building this around a year ago, to be honest, and I stopped in between. The reason is I thought I could build it out with Electron and other frameworks, and there were pretty similar ideas coming out on the wild already. The thing is, the main focus here is on Linux, and I use Linux personally as a desktop platform, and there are not many good applications out there for Linux. The reason is people don't develop it because you have to develop in native languages, and this is seen as a positive step towards it because there are a lot of JavaScript devs who are willing to work on open source technology. And yeah, so it's primarily built for Linux, so that people could build out stuff for it.
Maybe, just maybe, new NodeGui will usher in the year of the Linux desktop.
Even I want to see that happening. So let's see.
I think at this point, it's kind of like, what was that video game that never came out? Duke Nukem Forever. You know, we're all like, it's kind of a running joke, but we know that Linux has made huge strides in mobile. Just the desktop is still the niche, nerdy environment that it always has been. That being said, it's awesome to see a lead dev who is on Linux, because usually that's the reason why it will not get the attention that it deserves. And oftentimes it's just like, well, what OS does the lead developer run? And that's basically the one that's going to get the most love. So it's nice to see you on Linux.
Yeah, I think it's highly underrated. If you could just jump in, you could like it as much as you like OS X. Only thing, you won't get the shiny applications that you get with OS X. But yeah, I want to change that with NodeGui. So let's see.
Yep. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you have in the near and long term?
Yeah, the primary challenges are on exporting out the documentation part. I am actively trying to build out a system that way that is auto-generated, that the documentation is auto-generated, but I feel that the auto-generated documentations are not really helpful and are not really user-friendly. So I really love to write my own documentation. That way it's more personal and people feel like, you could actually read it, basically. So that's one of the major challenges, since I would say documentation is a lie for the future. So because the application moves forward, the documentation stays older. I want to improve that also. But let's see how that goes on. If anyone has any ideas, feel free to come in to the GitHub and open an issue and let's discuss that.
I love the focus on documentation because that's in the recipe to make this a huge success, and you're focused on it.
What are some other aspects of the community where people can pitch in, and how would they go about doing that? Is GitHub the place to be? Is there a chat room? Is there a forum? Where does the community get together, or at least where would you like them to really rally behind NodeGui and start to use it and start to help out?
Yeah, so initially I was focusing only on GitHub. I thought GitHub was the best place to do this. But eventually a lot of people came into the GitHub and asked me where they can do a private chat or things like that. And I ended up opening a Spectrum forum for it. It's a GitHub-owned chat forum. So you could basically sign up with your GitHub ID and then join the NodeGui GitHub Spectrum forum. And then you can either privately chat or discuss issues there, and we could just solve it out together. So even the newer contributors who are joining me on this journey are also joining Spectrum and asking me for help there, and we are just sharing knowledge there, and then looking forward to how it goes forward. So yeah, Spectrum is the way to go forward, and you can always open bugs and stuff like that on GitHub.
Very good, Atul. Well, this has been awesome. I'm very impressed with what you put out so far in such a short amount of time, what seems to be a very small team. And the results have been impressive, to say the least. As I said, your announcement last month was very well received and caught our eye here at JS Party. Looks like your announcement post has almost 200 comments on it. There's been a lot of activity on GitHub. So you're off to a great start. And I just wish you the best of luck on building this thing. I'd love to see the community go out and give it a try. I mean, the best thing you can do is maybe take a small open source Electron app that you're using, and if it's simple enough, maybe see how you could port it over to NodeGui and what that process would be like. Blog about it, make a YouTube video about it, share it with us. We'd be happy to share it with the whole JS community. Any final words from you before we call it a show?
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun doing this talk, and I really appreciate both of your time. Other than that, I encourage everyone to contribute. It's a very friendly community, and we basically try to help out as much as we can. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, Nick, thanks for hanging with me. And that's our show for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to JS Party this week. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows. Head to changelog.com/community. And do us a favor, share this show with a friend, rate us on Apple Podcast, go into Overcast and favorite it. And thank you to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast to fix things around here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. We're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out and support this show. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. And you can find more shows just like this at changelog.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Greetings, JS Party people. It's your boy, Jared. I just wanted to drop you a quick note because we are giving away 5 free passes to All Things Open on October 13th through 15th in Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, we will be there as well. Emma is keynoting the event. I'll be giving a talk on Svelte, and K-Ball will be joining the both of us on stage for a live JS Party recording. We're trying something new we call Lightning Chats, and we think it's going to be a ton of fun. You will not want to miss it. Come by and see us in booth 72, which is right by the coffee, so you know K-Ball will be energized. And I'm sure we'll have stickers and other JS Party swag for you there. This is your chance to join 4,500 open source technologists free of charge. All you have to do is tweet, "I want a free pass to All Things Open because," state your reason and mention at Changelog or at JS Party FM so we see it, and we'll DM the winners later this week. If you don't want to wait, register now as the price increases tomorrow. That's October 1st. Use promo code changelog20 to save 20% on your ticket, and we hope to see you there. That's all for now. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. You are programming, aren't you? You should be programming. I would probably go programming if I were you.